a sector in constant expansion. The African food industry has witnessed double-digit growth over the past decade. Now, the African Free Trade Area is opening the continent, easing the way countries exchange food and agricultural products. From the production of oranges
Africa is the last frontier.
to premium quality fertilizers
Fertilizer plays a huge role in the economies.
to long-haul food delivery.
But we also have plans to grow across East Africa and West Africa in the next 18 months.
Entrepreneurs and CEOs are exploring new opportunities to do more business across Africa. Welcome to Connecting Africa, the show that highlights the leaders and trailblazers connecting the continent through business. I'm Eleni Jarkas. Now, food production is a huge industry in Africa. The market is expected to be worth up to $1 trillion by 2030. Today, agriculture accounts for around 1/4 of Africa's GDP and almost 60% of the total workforce. And the continent is looking to tap into more opportunities in the food and beverage industry. Take Egyptian entrepreneurs. For decades, they've exported citrus fruits the world over. Now, Africa is becoming their next frontier market. In the fertile lands of Egypt's Nile Delta, citrus farming is a 1,000-year-old activity. For Mohammed Gad, it's a long family tradition. Gad is the second-generation owner of Gadco Egypt, a large citrus producer known for its Valencia and navel types of oranges.
The Egyptian citrus is very well known now for its quality. We export to the whole world. We start here from the collection of the fruits. We take this produce, we pack it, and then start shipping to the destination countries.
His family started production in the 90s when he was just a young boy, and at a time when the economy was liberalized, transforming Egypt into a top exporter of citrus fruits. Many food companies started trading predominantly with Asia, Europe, and North America. Gad's family business took a different road, betting big on the African market.
We first started with South Africa. Later on, we introduced our produce to Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, and Burundi. And then later on, we thought, why don't we export to the West as well?
Today, Gad believes the new Africa Free Trade Area, or the AfCFTA, could transform the sector once again, intensifying trade across the continent.
What we are looking for is trade between the whole continent. We want to send our produce from the north to the south, from the east to the west.
With the reduction of tariffs and the ease of movement for hundreds of food products, the FAO estimates intra-Africa trade of agricultural products could grow by 33% over the next few years. And that growth is luring more Egyptian entrepreneurs to look at the potential of the African market.
I'm Ali El Gamil, the CEO of Cairo 3 for Agriculture. I'm a third generation El Gamil. The company was founded by my late grandfather, then passed over to my father, who has transformed the business from a shipping business into a food safety industry leader.
Leading one of Egypt's largest food exporters, El Gamil sells top Egyptian products like oranges all over the world.
Egypt is the #1 citrus producer in the world, and I think this year we will remain #1.
With the opening of the African market and the connection of 54 nations, he thinks he can gain a dominant position in exporting citrus fruits in Africa.
Africa is the last frontier, so winning in Africa today will give our Egyptian brand a lot of equity in the next decades.
As trade across Africa continues to grow, issues do still persist.
The main challenge in Africa at the moment is the lack of infrastructure. Makes it very difficult for the daily trade. If there's a solution, I think we can have a better Africa.
The lack of infrastructure is a huge stumbling block to developing intra-Africa trade. Hisham Al-Nagar is the vice chair of Daltex, a 57-year-old conglomerate exporting agricultural equipment, machinery, seeds, pesticides, and citrus fruits as well. He's convinced that it's only a matter of time before the AFCFTA hits its full potential.
The amount of population in the market itself is very, very big, and the middle class and the affluent class are becoming more and more bigger. Of course, there is a lot of obstacles to get there, but we think the African market is the next step forward.
It's the same optimism that drives Gad back to his fields. He is already seeing progress in bridging the infrastructure gap and unlocking the continent's potential.
There is a new project which is the Cape Town-Cairo Road. This is going to help the trade between East African countries and the North and the South as well.
A project helping him and other Egyptian entrepreneurs connect people in Africa with their fruits. Whether it's fruits or appliances, getting goods from point A to B is a challenge faced across the continent. Now, technology could offer a solution. Up next, we discover a startup that is revolutionizing the way trucks deliver freight. Welcome back. Roads carry at least 80% of goods across Africa. Large trucks loaded with food and beverage items traversing the continent. And yet land infrastructure in Africa remains an issue for the movement of goods. Now, if a truck carrying oranges, for instance, travels from Egypt to South Africa, it has to cross at least 6 borders, taking around a week. KPMG says that in Africa, transportation costs are on average 50 to 175% higher than other parts of the world due to poor infrastructure. And in some African countries, it can take up to 1,600 documents just to cross a border. Now, a solution to these problems could be an app that you can have on your phone. Every day, truck driver Fouad Hagag delivers thousands of food products and appliances across Egypt. It's usually a tough job with many items to load, long waiting times, and forms to fill out. Now, Fouad has a new app that could solve his day-to-day challenges. It's called Trailer. Trailer puts Fouad directly in touch with shippers, helping secure more deliveries and reducing the long paper trail. The platform is the brainchild of Omar Hagras. He left his job at Uber in 2019, inspired to launch an app of his own that would one day transform the trucking sector.
The way to think about this is to think of us as Uber for trucks, where we can be on demand and we can go on schedule. The marketplace amalgamates between the demand and the supply we're getting. In this case, our supply are truck drivers and demand are bigger customers. The shipping lines, the fast-moving goods, the manufacturing companies, they insert all their loads, and then this is how it appears on the carrier app. So if I'm a truck driver, I'm going to see all these loads. Let's say I like this load. So I click on it, and then I request the load.
Starting out in the Middle East and North Africa, the company is now looking into the long-haul sector with an even bigger roadmap.
Africa is the biggest opportunity in the world now. Everyone knows that if you invest in Africa now, in 10 years' time, your money is going to be well worth it. But we also have plans to grow across East Africa and West Africa in the next 18 months.
Trailer also digitizes and simplifies border paperwork, and Africa seems the ideal market to grow.
These are countries where you have a lot of cross-border transactions happening between countries and neighboring countries. So for us, this ticks a very important criteria.
Facilitating cross-border transactions and trade is key for the continent, and Trailer is not the only company tackling that. Other startups like Swift, Nakla, and Kobo 360 are tapping into the $130 billion transport and logistics market.
You want to make it faster, because the faster it happens, then means the faster or the bigger the trade volumes are. As simple as that. Things becomes easier, travel becomes easier, trade becomes easier, economies grow together, and economies work to enable each other together, not versus against each other. So the bottom line here, it's a combination of what startups can bring on board, the governments can bring on board, and how to make this transaction a seamless one.
As trade continues to rise across the African continent, big food and beverage corporations like Coca-Cola, Armour Group, and Yara International have already signed up for the app. With the AFCFTA set to reduce tariffs, Hagras believes there are even more opportunities for his business to thrive.
The African trade agreements is a good step towards enabling these transactions, and by doing so, then our solution works even better.
Better for Hagras and better for Fuad, who could soon get more goods and deliveries across Africa too. Freight delivery can open new horizons for entrepreneurs across the continent. Another key step for Africa's food industry is growing more crops in a more efficient way. Next, we travel to Malawi, where a company has plans to boost the production of fertilizer, helping small and medium-sized farmers across the continent. Welcome back to Connecting Africa. In the show, we're exploring how the food industry can benefit from intra-Africa trade. Now, desertification, the lack of agri-technologies and low crop yields have long held back the potential of the African agriculture sector. And fertilizer nutrients like nitrogen, potash, and ammonia are key to boosting mass-scale crop production that Africa needs to feed its 1.3 billion people. A fertilizer producer saw an opportunity in this industry, and it's now helping African farmers get better yields and production across the continent. Nestled in the vast green landscape of Malawi is the town of Liwonde. Here works a CEO with an unusual passion.
Fertilizer is my first passion.
As strange as it sounds, Chris Yanakis transformed an odd devotion into a business that is key to Africa's agricultural growth.
You cannot have a thriving agricultural sector without also having a thriving fertilizer sector. They go hand in hand like shoes and shoelaces. Fertilizer plays a huge role in the economies in terms of food security and crop production.
Yanakis is chief executive of a large African conglomerate in fertilizers.
Meridian is a company which ships, imports, blends and distributes fertilizer in the southeastern part of Africa, including Mozambique, Zambia, Zimbabwe and Malawi, where we are now.
According to the International Fertilizer Organization in 2018, African farmers only apply between 10 and 13 kilograms of fertilizer per hectare, and that's compared to 120 in the rest of the world. Just one additional kilogram can triple crop yields. Now, with larger yields and the lifting of tariffs on thousands of food and agricultural items, thanks to the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, demand for fertilizer is expected to grow, opening the door to new opportunities for companies like the Meridian Group.
The pressure on the land is going to increase, the demand for food will increase exponentially. It's all about increasing the yield and making those yields grow year on year, and you cannot do that without fertilizer.
Fertilizers are considered essential goods, so they're already subject to minimum taxation throughout most of the continent. From a business in Malawi, Yanakis was able to expand along the value chain, now operating 6 plants across 4 countries. And with demand growing due to the AFCFTA, other companies could follow suit.
We can use other factories in the region to go from Mozambique to Zimbabwe, from Malawi to Zambia.
Meridian is now one of the region's top producers of fertilizer, processing 750,000 tons annually, and a dominant supplier to local farmers. Yanakis hopes the company will strengthen that position in the future and that more demand for food products will help his company expand further afield, reaching new farmers in Africa.
The fact that a free trade arrangement has been implemented for other goods which may be taxed is great. So absolutely, I believe that if we remove the barriers to entry, then the trade will be promoted accordingly. So we would like to use the region as a springboard to go further into the continent, perhaps into East Africa, into the Great Lakes, and certainly into the new projects in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
What opportunities can the AFCFTA bring to the food and beverage industry in Africa? What does the sector need next, and how can African nations trade more between each other? We discuss that next with top industry voices in Africa. Welcome back to Connecting Africa. Last year, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area officially started, establishing a free trade area between 54 African countries. The policy framework is still under implementation as all countries need to agree on trading rules. In January, the bloc announced it will remove tariffs on around 87% of 6,000 products, the majority being food and agricultural items. This is seen as a crucial step to boosting growth and fostering more intra-African trade in the food industry. To discuss the impact of the AFCFTA and what's needed next, I'm joined by Wandile Sihlobo and Lucy Muchoki. Now, Wandile is an agriculture expert and chief economist of the Agricultural Business Chamber of South Africa, and Lucy is the CEO of Pan-African Agribusiness and Agro-Industry Consortium, an organization supporting the agriculture private sector to be competitive in the continental global markets as well. Welcome to both of you. Great to have you on the show. Wandile, I want to start with you. We've heard about the lifting of tariffs on a lot of agricultural products, but has there been any specific policy change that excites you at this point?
I think right now we are at the point where we are rebuilding the African economies, and the African Continental Free Trade Agreement comes in handy as one of the tools then to say utilizing trade in this rebuilding process as well as agriculture. So I think from now on, it will springboard and add on into further reforms as we go forward.
We have a lot of deficits globally, grain issues, sunflower oil issues, fertilizer issues. And I mean, I guess I've heard the excitement about the potential of Africa being able to fill in some of those gaps. We know it can't happen overnight, but are you feeling encouraged by the potential?
I am encouraged at this point because you will remember Africa has been for a long time spending over $40 billion on importing food products. But I think at this point now, everyone is starting to look inwards and saying, within the African continent, which are some of the areas that we can explore in as far as planting. But also we see exciting examples on fertilizer in Nigeria, Malawi, Zambia, and in my home country in South Africa, there's starting to be conversations about how do we ramp up the fertilizer productions.
Lucy, I mean, in terms of the regulatory environment, what would you say the businesses that you're working with right now are telling you that is of vital importance and priority?
First and foremost, let me say that Africa, for the longest, we have done subsistence farming. And for now, we are shifting. There's a clear shift from subsistence farming to real business. And ACFA is really a big plus for us. It's such an opportunity. The fact that I can be able to sell my produce just across to the other country without all these regulatory frameworks that has been such a hindrance in the past. Now that there's free movement and the countries are agreeing and accepting, our head of states are accepting to this, I really see a huge improvement and a huge prospect for this continent, and of course for the private sector. This is something that we have been looking forward to in the longest.
So Lucy, you mentioned something so important. So moving from subsistence farming to commercial farming, you need storage, you need equipment. you need to think about logistics. And with having visited so many of these subsistence farmers, that is the big issue in sort of access to markets. What would you like to see occurring in terms of investment in the value chain that is going to make that transition to be commercially viable entities on the continent?
Most of our farms are smallholding farmers, but we want to cluster these farms because you cannot make any logical business with the kind of the smallholding farms that we have. So we are looking at clustering these farms so that there's economy of scale. At the same time, there's business out of that.
Look, I know citrus, South African citrus, big market is China. When it's Kenyan tea, they look to Europe. When it's Rwandan coffee again, looking to the east. How do we change that scenario, Wandile?
The numbers as we look today, we have intra-agricultural trade of around about $20 billion. So there's already something happening. But I think once we improve the productivity at the farms, we have the network industries better functioning, then there will be vibrancy.
So Lucy, what would you say the most important move is going to be?
I see the area of technology as very, very critical. The area of research, R&D, research and development, is very, very critical to us. So I see a scenario where our producers, being smallholders, as I said in the past, clustering them, and of course, we are looking at establishing special economic zones so that we can be able to cluster these smallholding farmers. They can be able to access these technologies that I'm talking about, and they can be able to access what we need for them, the trainings, the capacity development. They are able to access the markets. All this is important once you put them under one roof.
Thank you very much to both of you, Lucy and Wandile. Fantastic to have you on. And it's thrilling to see the agriculture and food industry hitting its full potential across the continent. The sector now accounts for around 25% of the continent's GDP, and with new intra-Africa trade opportunities unlocked by the AfCFTA, experts say it will keep expanding, creating new jobs, increasing incomes, and boosting food security. And that favorable growth prospect is already pushing CEOs and entrepreneurs in Africa to do more business within the continent. If you want to discover more about the subjects we cover on this program, you can check out our website. But for now, that's it for the show. Until next month, let's keep on connecting.